Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. The House passes the final version of the Laken Riley Act requiring detention of undocumented immigrants for theft-related crimes, sending President Donald Trump his first bill to sign into law. The Senate does not advance a bill requiring doctors to provide medical care to infants that survive an abortion. The party line vote was short of the 60 yes votes needed. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he does not second-guess President Trump's decision to pardon more than 1,500 January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol rioters, including those who assaulted law enforcement. New allegations against Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth that he was abusive against his second wife. Senate Transportation Committee unanimously approves Sean Duffy to be Transportation Secretary. White House Budget Director nominee Russell Vought testifies before the Senate Budget Committee. And Iran's vice president says of President Trump and his previous hard line on trying to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, I hope that this time around a Trump 2 will be more serious, more focused, more realistic. The House today passed the final version of the bill titled the Laken Riley Act, which a Fox News article explains would require ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, to arrest and detain illegal immigrants that have committed theft, burglary, or shoplifting until they are deported. States would also be granted standing under the legislation to take civil action against members of the federal government that do not enforce immigration laws. And the reason for another House vote, a Republican amendment that added assault of law enforcement officers to the list of crimes that would trigger ICE detainment, was added last week in the Senate. The bill is named for a University of Georgia student murdered by an undocumented immigrant who was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Here's some of the debate before the House vote. Congressman Rudy Yakum, Republican from Indiana.
The Biden-Harris administration was marked by failure and corruption. But the failure that sits head and shoulders above all others was their open border policy. Almost immediately after President Biden was sworn in, America was overrun by a massive, unprecedented surge in illegal immigrants. The chart next to me shows just how dramatically President Biden failed compared to his predecessors. Over double the southern border crossings of any president since 2001. This border chaos was ignored for all 4 years of the Biden and Harris administration. It was downplayed as seasonal or written off as mere ebbs and flows. Find me somewhere on this chart where the surge was only seasonal. Show me where it ebbed or flowed. Illegal immigrants continue streaming across President Biden's open border in droves because they knew they'd face no consequences from an administration that was more focused on inventing new rhetorical flourishes to paper over this very real crisis. More content to wish it away rather than actually do something about it. President Biden's failure at the border had impacts across America. Every town was a border town. Once sleepy places were suddenly forced to contend with sex trafficking, drug trafficking, child labor, infectious diseases, petty theft, and yes, even rape and murder. Cartels got rich, and small towns in my district were left scrambling for money and resources. This chaos was a choice made every single day of Joe Biden's presidency. No more. Monday marked a new era. President Trump has already taken more decisive action in 48 hours than President Biden took in 4 years. Let's send this bill to President Trump's desk. I urge my colleagues to vote for sanity and common sense. I urge them to vote yes. I yield back.
Congressman Rudy Yakum, Republican from Indiana, on the House floor before the House did pass this bill. Congressman Adriano Espat, Democrat from New York, voted no.
I rise in opposition to S5 because the bill is redundant. In fact, the provisions of this bill to penalize those that have committed violent crimes are already included in a penal code. So this legislation is redundant. What it does do, in fact, is it would force ICE to treat minor offenses as violent ones. That includes, of course, a child caught stealing a candy bar from Walmart, someone who jumps the turnstile in a New York City subway, or takes a box of cornflakes because they otherwise have no way to make ends meet. But it also sends a chilling effect out there amongst law-abiding families and workers who are too frightened to show up to their ships at farms, hospitals, businesses, and schools across the country. Mr. Speaker, this bill is redundant. And frankly, the Laken Riley family should not be subject to the political theater that's about to happen here today. In fact, we should be looking at this issue to fix the problems of both the border, but also to regularize dreamers, farm workers, and keep families whole. At the end of the day, dreamers are productive. They contribute to our society. Farmers need their workers, and we need their workers. And families need to stay together because families that are divided are weak families, and that makes up a weak nation. So this is a redundant bill. While they are targeting the immigrant communities for stealing a candy bar, the folks from January 6th, get this, were released. They were released and sent out to our communities, felons. Today, I think of Officer Daniel Hodge, whose gas mask was ripped off his face as he was punched in the face and was stuck in between two doors. America saw the film. America saw the video of him crying for help.
Gentleman's time has expired.
We will continue to fight for sanity and against any political theater that happens here in our floor. Thank you. I yield back.
Congressman Adriano Espat, Democrat from New York, on the House floor before the House did pass the Laken Riley Act. The vote was 263 to 156, 46 Democrats voting yes with Republicans. This is the final passage of the bill that the Senate already passed, so it now goes to President Donald Trump, expected to sign it into law, the first bill of his new presidency he'll be doing that with. On the subject of immigration and border security, a story from Reuters, the U.S. military is preparing to send about 1,000 additional active duty troops to the border with Mexico, a U.S. official said, just 2 days after President Donald Trump signed an executive order on immigration. The official, speaking on condition of anonymity, did not say when the troops would be deployed. They'd be joining the roughly 2,200 active duty and thousands of National Guard troops already on the border. That was from Reuters. The Senate today voted down a bill titled Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, which would require healthcare practitioners provide medical care to an infant after a failed abortion. 60 votes were needed to advance the bill. The vote was party line 52 to 47. Today is the anniversary of the 1973 Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade, which protected a constitutional right to an abortion. That decision was overturned in 2022 by the decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. And the annual March for Life will be taking place in Washington on Friday. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, spoke on the Senate floor this morning in favor of the bill.
Mr. President, later today, the Senate will proceed to a vote on whether to move to the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. It's a simple bill, Mr. President. It simply states that a baby born alive after an attempted abortion must be given the same protection and medical care that any other newborn baby would be given. That's it. A baby born alive after an attempted abortion must be given the same protection and medical care that any other newborn baby would be given. Mr. President, this shouldn't be a controversial bill. We should all be able to agree that a baby born alive after an attempted abortion must be protected. And yet I fully expect that later today my Democrat colleagues will vote no on this legislation. They will vote against protection for a living, breathing, newborn baby simply because that child has been born alive after an attempted abortion. Now, why are they going to vote like that, Mr. President? After all, I think most Democrats would still claim to oppose infanticide, even if the moral line at times appears to be slipping. And yet Democrats are going to vote against legislation to provide appropriate medical care to living, breathing, newborn children. I'm sure they'll offer some vague justifications for their opposition, like keeping the decision between a woman and her doctor, even when the decision we're talking about is denying a child appropriate medical care. But, Mr. President, I think it's safe to say that what it all boils down to is this. Democrats will oppose legislation to provide appropriate medical care to newborn children who survive abortions because they are afraid. They're afraid if they recognize the humanity of a living, breathing, born baby in an abortion clinic, they might end up pointing to the humanity of the unborn baby in the abortion clinic.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, on the Senate floor. Senator Tina Smith, a Democrat from Minnesota, spoke about this bill at a news conference.
2 days into the new Trump administration with Republicans in charge, and are they offering bills to lower the cost for Americans? Are they offering a bill to lower the cost of health care or lower the cost of housing? No, they are not. And after campaigning all of last year, telling Americans not to worry about a national abortion ban and more infringements on their freedoms, this is where we are today. One of the very first laws that they are trying to pass would be a federal law that would mandate what doctors must do in their practice in the event of these very rare but tragic and complicated health crises that happens in some women's pregnancies. And nobody wants this. That's the thing. So let's be clear. This law that we're going to be voting on in just a few minutes, this proposed law, plays on misinformation and misunderstanding, but like all anti-abortion bills, it is designed to take away the rights of patients and doctors to make the very best decision that they have in the very unique situations that confronts every single patient. So my message to women in Minnesota and across this nation is that we are not going to do this. Senate Democrats respect you. We respect your decision-making power, and we trust you and your doctor to make the very best decisions that you can about your health care, including about abortion. And we're telling Republicans to butt out. We understand that you are trying to figure out how to afford your life, and we are on your side.
Senator Tina Smith, a Democrat from Minnesota, at a news conference in the U.S. Capitol building before that Senate floor vote on this bill. The sponsors of the bill titling it the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. The bill did not advance. The vote was 52-47. Party line, the Republicans voting yes and the Democratic caucus voting no. It was short of the 60 votes needed. One senator who did not vote, Bill Hagerty, Republican of Tennessee. There's an NPR article from Tuesday that reads, on the second day of the second Trump administration, a search for the term abortion on the website for the Federal Department of Health and Human Services brings up 166 results. The top hit is from January 24th, 2020, during President Trump's first term, and is about how California violated the rights of two religious organizations that wanted to offer health plans that excluded coverage for abortion. Trying to sort the results to see the most recent items first returns no links at all, and the message reads, search unreachable. A site the Biden administration launched after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, reproductiverights.gov, is now a broken link. These changes to the information available on government websites reflects quiet moves on the part of the new Trump administration on abortion. That was from NPR. And from the Hill, Speaker Mike Johnson defended President Trump's sweeping pardons of those who stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021, including numerous people who violently attacked police officers. Trump, in the first hours of his presidency, granted a full and unconditional pardon to the bulk of those who attacked the Capitol on January 6, 2021, in an attempt to stop the certification of electors for former President Biden, as Trump denied the results of the 2020 election. About 1,500 January 6 defendants got full pardons, and Trump commuted the sentences of 14 members of the far-right Proud Boys and Oath Keepers who plotted to stop the transfer of power. That was from the Hill. Speaker Johnson got the question from a reporter at today's House Republican Leadership News Conference.
Republicans have long said you guys back the blue. How do you justifiably say that when Trump just pardoned a bunch of violent January 6 rioters who attacked Capitol Police? And if those rioters come to the Capitol, will you welcome them back here?
So look, everybody can describe this however they want. The president has the pardon and commutation authority. It's his decision, and I think what was made clear all along is that peaceful protests and people who engage in that should never be punished. There was a weaponization of the Justice Department. There was a weaponization of the events, the following, the prosecutions that happened after January 6th. It was a terrible time and a terrible chapter in America's history. The president's made his decision. I don't second guess those. those. And yes, it's kind of my ethos, my worldview. We believe in redemption. We believe in second chances. If you would argue that those people didn't pay a heavy penalty, having been incarcerated and all of that's up to you. But the president's made a decision. We move forward. There are better days ahead of us. That's what we're excited about. We're not looking backwards. We're looking forward.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, at a news conference today with other House Republican leaders. Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, who was on the House January 6th Attack Investigative Committee, is ranking member of the Judiciary Committee and a subcommittee of which held a hearing today on immigration policy. Congressman Raskin used part of his opening statement at that hearing to discuss the pardons.
The chairman began by saying the point here is to restore the rule of law. Restore the rule of law. Can you even pretend to do that if you stand by and support Donald Trump, who on day one, as the chairman of the committee just said, day one of his presidency, pardoned 1,500 insurrectionists, including hundreds of people who violently assaulted and attacked American police officers? Let's just take one person who is free today, Julian Cater, who had been convicted after having every due process protection, the right to counsel, the right to cross-examine witnesses, the right to introduce evidence, but they had him completely. They knew exactly what happened. Most of this was videotaped so the whole world could see it. Well, Julian Cater repeatedly violently assaulted our officer protecting us in Congress, Officer Brian Sicknick, who then proceeded to have several strokes and died on January the 7th, 2021, the next day. The family of Officer Sicknick is absolutely devastated and demolished by what's just happened. I invite any of my colleagues, including the members new to this committee who maybe weren't here on January 6th and didn't experience the trauma of that violent insurrection when we saw a mob marauding through here yelling, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence," and looking to assassinate Nancy Pelosi. And now you have the temerity to come forward and say this is about public safety? How much safer are we now with these 1,500 criminals at large in Washington, D.C. and going out into the country? Are you vouching that these people are not going to be attacking any other police officers? Are you vouching that they're no longer a threat to public safety? What an outrage. What a scandal.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, part of his opening statement at today's Judiciary Subcommittee hearing on a different subject, immigration and border security. Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican of Alaska, writing today on X, "The Capitol Police officers are the backbone of Congress. Every day they protect and serve the halls of democracy. I strongly denounce the blanket pardons given to the violent offenders who assaulted these brave men and women in uniform." A news release from House Speaker Mike Johnson saying that he and the House Republican Conference today announced the intent to establish a new select subcommittee for the 119th Congress to continue House Republicans' investigation into all events leading up to and after January 6th. The work will be chaired by Congressman Barry Loudermilk of Georgia and exist as a select subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee chaired by Congressman Jim Jordan. Attached is a statement from Speaker Johnson that reads, "House Republicans are proud of our work so far in exposing the false narratives peddled by the politically motivated January 6th Select Committee during the 117th Congress, but there is still more work to be done. We are establishing this select subcommittee to continue our efforts to uncover the full truth that is owed to the American people." The Supreme Court today heard a case involving police. CNN writes that the court spent nearly 80 minutes debating a traffic stop outside Houston that turned deadly in just 5 seconds, a decision that could determine whether courts may consider the circumstances leading up to the use of deadly force. Majority of the justices signaled they will side with the family of an unarmed 24-year-old man who was killed soon after being pulled over driving a rental car in 2016 for suspected toll violations. The excessive force suit from the family is one of many to make its way to the high court at a time when the nation and federal courts continue to wrestle with when to hold police accountable for split-second decisions that wind up being fatal. And the CNN article continues that thorny and often technical legal debate is increasingly wrapped up in politics, with President Donald Trump often suggesting police should have more license to use excessive force. The case is Barnes v. Felix. Here's a minute of the oral argument. Justice Samuel Alito questioning attorney Nathaniel Zielinski.
Well, here, the stop is for failure to pay tolls. But we could ratchet up very gradually the severity of the reason for the stop, and at what point would the offense become sufficiently serious? At what point, if any, would the offense become sufficiently serious in your judgment to make it reasonable for the officer to get on the sill of the car?
So, Justice Alito, it's a very difficult question to answer because, as this court has said, that it is a fact-specific question that's going to depend on each given case. And there are no magic rules. There's no on-off switch. And that's Justice Scalia and Scott. You can't just start drawing the lines precisely because these cases are so numerous and there are so many different permutations. And so I think it would be very dangerous to start drawing those lines.
Attorney Nathaniel Zielinski questioned by Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito in today's oral argument in the case Barnes v. Felix about the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution and police use of deadly force. From CBS News, President Trump signed executive orders Monday and Tuesday that aim to end diversity, equity, and inclusion programs within the federal government. Mr. Trump said in his inaugural address on Monday, "We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based." A memo from the U.S. Office of Personnel Management Tuesday evening called for all federal DEI employees to be placed on leave by Wednesday evening. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed the move in a post on X, citing CBS News reporting from CBS. The memo from OPM has this line: "These programs divided Americans by race, wasted taxpayer dollars, and resulted in shameful discrimination." Congressman James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, chair of the Oversight and Accountability Committee, was on CNN today, questioned about this.
Civil rights groups argue that DEI initiatives are meant to protect the most vulnerable populations and to correct historic wrongs. And DEI does cover, not just minorities, pregnant women as well, and military spouses. What do you say to that?
But Pam, there are already rules on the books to discriminate. You can't discriminate against a pregnant worker. You have to accommodate them. That is the law. You cannot discriminate against a minority or someone that's too old. These laws are written in. You cannot discriminate. So we believe the DEI is just an unnecessary layer of bureaucracy, an added layer, duplicative services.
Congressman James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, today on CNN. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, reacted at a news conference today, along with members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
Congressman Bocan, the day before I go for Senate before, Congressman Bocan spoke to the attack on DEI, but I've heard less from Democrats the last 24 hours about the orders rolling back not just DEI, but rolling back affirmative action protections, including LBJ's affirmative action order. I wondered what the caucus's strategy was on that and what the effect you thought these changes would have on the country.
Sure. I mean, it's incredibly alarming. We as a country strive to create a more equitable space for everyone. I think the misinformation and disinformation on what DEI hire is has been that there's an individual hired because of their diversity, and many of these positions are positions in which the person is responsible for diversifying the workplace, for recruitment, for retention, for creating a space that is welcoming for everyone. And it is unfortunate at this moment, as they are suspended with pay, that we are paying people not to work. And I think to have tax dollars go out to individuals who are actually not doing work at this moment does the opposite of efficiency. When they talk about creating a more efficient workplace, that is what DEI hires essentially do. These people that are in these positions are trying to create an environment where the most efficient people for the job are hired. And so we're going to do everything that we can, again, to fight against the misinformation that is out there by putting out the correct information on what these titles actually means, what diversity, equity, inclusion actually stands for, and what kind of jobs are going to be lost, and how that's going to impact the workplace in this country.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, at a news conference with other members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. A new Reuters Ipsos poll conducted Monday and Tuesday following President Trump's inauguration shows 47% of Americans approve of Donald Trump's presidency. That's higher than most of his first term. Poll also shows 58% said that he should not pardon all people convicted of crimes during the January 6, 2021 assault on the U.S. Capitol. U.S. Senate is continuing to work on Trump administration cabinet nominees. A final vote on John Ratcliffe for CIA director could happen on Thursday. And after that, they'll move to Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth, although Democrats have been insisting on additional procedural votes. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune said he is willing to keep the Senate in session over the weekend if that's what's required to get that nomination through. NBC News reports that senators received an affidavit Tuesday from the former sister-in-law of Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth, in which she says his behavior caused his second wife to fear for her safety. The receipt of the affidavit comes after Senate Armed Services Committee staffers were in contact with Hegseth's former sister-in-law for several days, reporting from NBC News. Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat of Virginia, member of the committee, spoke on the Senate floor today.
An affidavit was filed yesterday by one Danielle Hegseth, the former sister-in-law of the nominee, revealing publicly facts suggesting spousal abuse in Mr. Hegseth's second marriage. I don't know Danielle Hegseth. I haven't talked to her. I was not aware of that allegation, but it didn't surprise anyone on the committee who had reviewed the record. Why not? Because there are already facts in the record raising this very question. In fact, I asked Mr. Hegseth about it at the Armed Services Committee. During his second divorce, his own mother wrote him a letter saying, essentially, you are a serial abuser of women, including your own two wives, and you need to look in the mirror, get some help, and figure this out. His mother even used the phrase, neither X nor Y, the names of the first two wives, deserved the treatment they have received at your hand. All the committee members had access to that before the hearing. All of them. What an extraordinary letter. Your mother writing you a letter saying you're a serial abuser of women that needs to look in the mirror and get help, and saying that the two wives that you have abused do not deserve the treatment they have received at your hand. And so the allegation from Danielle Hegseth yesterday, reporting her observations of Mr. Hegseth's behavior, and in particular abuse of her sister-in-law, have to be given some credence by this committee. And we have to avoid a rush that we may regret. I found it very unusual that when I asked Mr. Hegseth at the hearing, a sexual assault would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, he would not agree with me. Spousal abuse would be disqualifying to be a Secretary of Defense, he would not agree with me. Being impaired by alcohol while on the job would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, he would not agree with me. These are not hard questions. They are clearly disqualifying behaviors, and the fact that he would not agree that they were disqualifying behaviors suggested to me, as I was watching that testimony, that they evinced a little bit of a guilty conscience. Why would I want to agree if I have concerns about my own behavior?
Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat of Virginia, member of the Armed Services Committee, on the Senate floor. Another line from the NBC News article, both Pete Hegseth and Samantha Hegseth signed a 2021 court document that said that neither parent claimed to be a victim of domestic abuse, And Axios has an article quoting Arthur Schwartz, a spokesperson for Pete Hegseth, saying Mr. Hegseth categorically denies each and every allegation. The only thing it got right is the spelling of his name. The Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee voted today unanimously to report Sean Duffy for Transportation Secretary in the Trump administration. Sean Duffy is a former Republican congressman of Wisconsin who has been a Fox News contributor for the past couple of years. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, chairs the committee.
Congressman Duffy comes to the Department of Transportation at a pivotal moment. In aviation, the FAA continues a persistent shortage of air traffic controllers as it works to instill a culture of safety across the industry. On the roads, President Trump has moved to stop costly and unpopular electric vehicle mandates so that every American can choose to buy the car of his or her choice. Meanwhile, across all sectors, the department faces the rise of emerging technologies like unmanned drones and self-driving cars, which bring both opportunities and challenges. Congressman Duffy is prepared to meet these challenges. To quote Senator Baldwin at his hearing last week, quote, "Shawn is the right person for this job." A 5-term congressman and former co-chair of the Great Lakes Task Force, Representative Duffy has successfully advanced transportation projects like the St. Croix crossing with strong bipartisan and bicameral support. As Secretary, he will prioritize safety while fixing our broken permitting process. Sadly, radical environmentalists have captured federal permitting and shifted it from NIMBY to bananas, as in build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone. I expect that to end with Secretary Duffy. He will work, as Senator Baldwin said, with both sides of the aisle to improve our infrastructure and address the challenges that arise in the years ahead. Most importantly, Congressman Duffy's personal experiences, his wife Rachel's head-on crash, his dedication to raising a daughter with a disability, show that he appreciates the responsibility of the role. He told us, quote, "As the father of 9 kids, I think about transportation quite a bit, and about transportation safety a lot. He knows what American families face in their daily lives and how important safety is to them. In many ways, he embodies the revolution of common sense that President Trump has called for."
Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, chair of the Transportation Committee, at today's meeting. On the nominee, Senator Maria Cantwell, Democrat of Washington State, is the ranking member.
In my state, the bipartisan infrastructure bill delivered on billions of dollars of investment in many projects throughout the state of Washington, including our ports, because as a gateway state, we grow a lot of products all throughout the country that are delivered through our ports to Asia. I was pleased that Mr. Duffy, in response to questioning last week, stated clearly that the funding for these infrastructure priorities and critical infrastructure needs are already underway and that he will honor the funding commitments made in the last administration. Mr. Duffy committed that these funding decisions will be free from political interference under his leadership at the Department of Transportation. I know that many people have seen President Trump's executive order issued Monday that potentially froze all bipartisan infrastructure funding, which raised new concerns. Thankfully, Mr. Duffy has clarified for me and many others on this committee that he's going to continue to work to expedite transportation infrastructure investments that have been made by this Congress and hope to get these projects completed. This is critical because we've learned through the pandemic that supply chains are critical to our investment, to moving systems throughout the United States, our roads, our bridges, our public transit, our ports, our railroad, because they are part of a holistic system. Building a resilient transportation system that mitigates disruptions and drives down costs for businesses and consumers should be our highest priority. That is why I had authored many programs that helped us do that, like the railroad crossing elimination and mega programs. I'm pleased that Mr. Duffy also signaled this week for many important initiatives that this committee talked to him about. I'll let committee members talk about the commitments and conversations they had both at the hearing and in subsequent conversation. I want to say I do remain concerned about Project 2025 and this administration's war against electric vehicles. I think the Project 2025 derogatory language with respect to transportation raises some serious questions, but I'm sure that will go on in a long debate well past today's hearing.
Senator Maria Cantwell, Democrat of Washington State, ranking member on the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee at today's business meeting on the Sean Duffy nomination for Transportation Secretary. The committee voted unanimously 28-0 to report the nomination to the full Senate. Washington today continues in a moment with another Trump administration nominee, Russell Vought, for OMB director, testifying before the Senate Budget Committee.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea, it's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Russell Vought, who was director of the White House Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, during the final 2 years of President Trump's first administration, has been nominated to lead OMB now in the second administration. He testified today before the Senate Budget Committee. The OMB director oversees the construction of the president's budget proposal and reviews proposed regulations. Senator John Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana, asked Russell Vought about President Trump's pledge to cut wasteful spending.
I'm not asking you to get ahead of President Trump. But if you were king for a day, tell me how you would save money in the federal budget without impacting the American people.
Thank you, Senator. I think it's the strategy that we had in the first term, which is to go really and take a very close look at the agencies that are spending and wasting money, and I believe weaponized at times against the American people. When they put a 77-year-old Navy veteran in jail, Joe Robertson, for 18 months for building 4 ponds on his ranch to be prepared for wildfires, that's the EPA. I think we have to look at that, and we have to look at the agencies that Congress has a vote on every single year through the appropriations process. And then I think we need to go after the mandatory programs that Senator Cornyn mentioned that are keeping people out of the workforce because they have become not just a social safety net, but they have become a benefit hammock, and increasingly so in the aftermath of COVID, as many of these policies were impacting people's decisions to go back into the workforce. And I believe, and because we produce budgets along these lines, you can get sizable levels of savings and reforms that can lead to a balanced budget and get us back headed in a fiscal trajectory, not only that we would all be proud of, but we could say this is going to keep us from fiscal ruin.
White House Budget Director, or OMB Director, nominee Russell Vought at a Senate Budget Committee confirmation hearing. Questions from John Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana. The story from The Hill on this hearing. Democrats on Wednesday grilled Russell Vought over recent executive orders made by President Trump. They say illegally target funding authorized by former President Biden. As Vought testified before the Senate Budget Committee, Democrats pressed him about orders announced earlier this week that paused the disbursement of funds appropriated through 2 major pieces of Biden's agenda, the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Democrats have been sounding alarm over the orders, which they argue could result in the illegal impoundment of federal funding. That was reporting from The Hill. Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington State, was one of those senators who brought this up.
On his first day in office, we saw the president order, among other things, what appears to be an illegal deferral of Inflation Reduction Act, bipartisan infrastructure law, and foreign assistance funds, as Senator Merkley referred to. And Mr. Vought, your written response when pressed on this, that you will follow the advice of the incoming OMB General Counsel, Mark Paoletta, someone who has called the Impoundment Control Act a stupid law, and recently tweeted at you to impound, baby, impound is a bit rich. Look, As I said to you at our meeting, members of Congress on both sides must know a deal is a deal. A deal is a deal when we reach a bipartisan agreement on major legislation. Agreements cannot happen, and Congress cannot function without that level of trust. And impound, baby, impound is not the answer I am looking for. So I want to ask you today, will you, if confirmed, as director, faithfully follow the law, the Impoundment Control Act, yes or no?
Senator, we will faithfully uphold the law. The president ran on the notion that the Impoundment Control Act is unconstitutional. I agree with that. I would, in response to both questions, say that what the president has unveiled already are not impoundments. They are programmatic
Has the impoundment
delays.
law ever been said to be unconstitutional by a court of law?
Not to my knowledge,
it
Senator,
has
no.
not. So it is the law of the land. I don't care what the president said when he was running. It is the law of the land. So will you follow that law if you are confirmed to this office?
Senator, the president and his team is going to go through a review with our lawyers, if confirmed, including the Department of Justice, to explore the parameters of the law with regard to the Impoundment Control Act. He hasn't developed a strategy that he's announced as it pertains to how he would approach it. There are pieces of legislation that have been proposed by members of this committee.
We propose legislation all the time.
Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington State, questioning OMB Director nominee Russell Vought at today's Budget Committee confirmation hearing. His nomination has already been reported out of another committee, Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. Reference to the Impoundment Control Act that was signed into law during the Nixon administration, 1974. On Wall Street today, the Dow up 130, NASDAQ up 252, S&P up 37. CNBC writes that President Donald Trump on Wednesday threatened to impose high levels of sanctions on Russia and tariffs on imports from there if the country did not reach a settlement to end its nearly 3-year-old war against Ukraine. Trump's warning, made in a social media post on his third day as president, called out Russian President Vladimir Putin by name. If we don't make a deal, and soon, I have no other choice but to put high levels of taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on anything being sold by Russia to the United States and various other participating countries, Trump wrote on Truth Social. Let's get this war, which never would have started if I were president, over with. We can do it the easy way or the hard way, and the easy way is always better, Trump wrote. That was reporting from CNBC. President Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on all goods coming into the United States and additional tariffs on goods from certain countries like China, Mexico, and Canada. In London today, at Prime Minister's Question Time, Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democratic Party, questioned Prime Minister Keir Starmer, head of the Labour Party, about trade.
Can the Prime Minister guarantee that he will not sell out Britain's fantastic farmers to Donald Trump in a trade deal that undermines our high food and animal welfare standards in the way that the Conservatives sold them out in the Australia and New Zealand deals?
Mr. Speaker, we will work with the US, we will work with other countries, but we will never lower our standards.
The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer during Prime Minister's Question Time in the House of Commons in London. Story from Reuters. Iran hopes U.S. President Donald Trump will choose rationality in its dealing with the Islamic Republic. Iran's Vice President for Strategic Affairs, Mohammad Javad Zarif, said on Wednesday, adding Tehran has never sought nuclear weapons. Addressing the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Zarif said Iran did not pose a security threat to the world. In 2018, then President Trump reneged on Tehran's 2015 nuclear deal with world powers and reimposed harsh U.S. sanctions as part of his maximum pressure policy against the country. In response, Tehran breached the deal in several ways, including by accelerating its uranium enrichment. Trump has vowed to return to the policy he pursued in his previous term that sought use of economic pressure to force the country to negotiate a deal on its nuclear program, ballistic missile program, and regional activities. That was from the Reuters article. Here is the Iranian vice president in Davos.
Trump pulled out of JCPOA on May 8th. You look at this sequence of events. And I have reason from what I heard from leaders of other countries, that they had convinced Trump of two things. One, Iran was crumbling, and a sudden withdrawal from JCPOA would be the last nail on Iran's coffin. Second, that with these documents, forged documents that Netanyahu is showing, there would be an international support for the United States to withdraw from JCPOA. Both extremely wrong assumptions of Trump's advisors, not Trump himself. Now, I hope that this time he kicked Bolton out, he kicked Robin Hook out, he kicked Pompeo out, because Pompeo was seeking an appointment. Hook was there until, what, yesterday? He withdrew the Secret Service support from John Bolton on a bogus charge that Iran was trying to kill him, which has been bogus from the very beginning. So I hope that this time around, a Trump 2 will be more serious, more focused, more realistic, to know that his withdrawal the withdrawal that was imposed on him, and he has said it, that he did it for Israel. And he has said now that he won't do anything for any other country. He said it on his inauguration. After he withdrew from JCPOA, Iran has gained much more nuclear capability based on your breakout calculations. I don't do breakout calculations because we don't want to break out. But based on American breakout calculations, we were a year away from a nuclear weapon when Bolton wrote that whatever executive order to get Trump out, memorandum to get Trump out. And today, even the Americans say we are a few days away. So in terms of being able to dissuade Iran, it has failed. Now, it has imposed heavy economic cost on the Iranian people. Of course, the Iranian government is suffering, but the Iranian people and the most vulnerable groups in Iran are suffering the most.
Iran's Vice President for Strategic Affairs, Mohammad Javad Zarif, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. He also said that Iran was surprised by Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023. He said, "We didn't know about October 7th. Actually, we were supposed to have a meeting with the Americans on the nuclear deal's renewal on October 9th, which was undermined and destroyed by this operation." President Donald Trump is scheduled to speak to the World Economic Forum remotely tomorrow, January 23rd, according to the group's president. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word. It's free. And get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.